Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and this is my part one of my analysis of the Delphi trial of Richard Allen. And I'm not going to do a day by day. That's why I'm not going to say day one, day two. I will do it in parts. I will do an analysis when I see there is something worthwhile to talk about. There's going to be so much information and so much kind of boring stuff that goes on in trials where somebody's credibility is going to be questioned for 3 hours, some expert. And I'm not going to get into all of that. I'm not going to do blow by blow. I'm going to do an analysis of the really important things. So this is part one. I want to say just right up front, I think this trial is. Now, why do I feel this way? Well, I'm not even going to say here whether I think Richard Allen is guilty or not guilty. I think they had reasons to, definitely, I believe they had reasons to arrest him. They had reasons to decide to prosecute him, charge him and prosecute him. And here we are today because there seems to be some very good evidence supporting the prosecution's case that Richard Allen may indeed be the person who killed these two beautiful girls. However, I also think there's so much, this case is so much of a mess. And I'm going to tell you why I think there's so many things in this case that are problematic. One is, it was a difficult case to begin with, but it took a long time for them to arrest him. I think it was 5 years. And that right there is fodder for the defense to say, hey, you know, they were all over the map and did a lot of stupid things. And I have to say, I wasn't too impressed by some people who were involved in the police side of things in this particular case. And then they finally got Richard Allen. Now, I want to say this. Interestingly, the judge, I think the judge also is going to cause problems because the judge is saying there's things that the defense can't present in court. And can't use in court. Let me tell you two of them I think that are really kind of fascinating to me. Stated here, the court will not permit the evidence submitted by the defense in support of their arguments regarding third-party perpetrators in the trial of this cause, as the probative value of such evidence is greatly outweighed by confusion of the issues and its potential to mislead the jury. Okay, Jose Baez, who definitely threw a third party out there for Casey Anthony. If he were part of this case, he would be very upset. And the defense is very upset because they have their Odinist theory. They sure do. And what I find interesting about this statement is they did what is being said is that there's not enough evidence pointing toward that third party, not enough evidence to support a third party involvement, especially the Odinists, in spite of all the stuff we're seeing all over the internet, and that the defense has pushed for years to basically poison the jury, which is why this whole case is a mess to begin with. The defense did everything to poison the jury. This should not have ever been allowed, but it happened. And I'm against the civilian jury system. And I already see that when you get 12 people off a bus stop, which is what I say, not that they're not good people, but they have had so much incoming information about Odinism and how this is what it was and how the sticks were laid and all this kind of nonsense that the defense has been putting out over and over and over again and getting YouTubers to go along with the program so that it gets into everybody's brain as a possibility. And all you need is that reasonable doubt. And if you think it's a possibility, there you have reasonable doubt. You got 12 people, you just need one person who goes, yeah, those Odinists. And that could do the case in, even if he's guilty. So this is a big problem. So essentially what has been determined here is that they can't bring in the Odinist theory, but the Odinist theory is already sunk into everybody's head. And don't believe for a minute when they question these people, do you know anything about the case? The jury, do you know anything about the case? And jury number one goes, nope, never heard a thing about it. Okay, you either live in a shack that has no internet and no television, or you're just lying. So if 12 people say they don't know anything about the Odinist theory, there's probably 12 people lying. It's just nonsense. Everybody's got to know about this before this case ever got to court. So the Odinist theory is out there. And she says Let me look at it again. Um, there wasn't enough evidence. So the confusion of the issues and its potential to mislead the jury. Isn't that what the defense always does? Don't they always want to cause confusion of the issues and mislead the jury? Isn't that the point of a defense? I'm not in favor of that methodology, but it's done case and case after case after case. Come on now. What? I mean, unless the prosecution is absolutely telling the truth 100% of the time, they too can be misleading the jury. And the defense, that's their job, is to confuse the jury, to say that that prosecution's full of crap. And they're trying to get the jury to, oh, okay, and go along with that. I'm not going to say whether innocent or guilty. That's not the point. Both sides can do that because we have a system that is a little questionable. I believe in a professional jury system. Fought this for years. People like myself as a profiler, I want people to go to profiling and jury school and come. I want them to be then just picked out of a hat to be at this particular trial and have 5 to 7 professional jurors. So at least they can't be as easily misled because they will understand evidence. But regular folks, they may watch all the television programs they want, but they're not professionals in the field, and they can be easily hoodwinked by either the prosecution or the defense. So I find it kind of funny. Let's not talk about the odinist theory because that might mislead them. Okay. And so they're also not allowed to talk about any of the other possible people, like Ron Logan. That's the property the girls were found on. Or Kevin Kline, that creepo dude, and his daddy. I mean, those are good alternative suspects in my mind. The reason they're not great, and I'll tell you why I think this is true. And when people think he's being railroaded, like absolutely straight up railroaded, I'm going to say the police had way better people to railroad. And those, and Keegan Kline and Ron Logan were 2 of them. And to pick the guy that lived in town, wasn't known to be creepy, and as is pointed out by the defense, he stayed around for the next 5 years. He wouldn't have run away. No, he wouldn't, because that would be suspicious. But that's kind of silly. But no, I mean, he is not the best suspect, except that he was out there that day and admitted that, and somebody saw, some guy with bloody or muddy clothes, and he was there. Okay, so he is a good suspect, but the other ones were, if you're going to railroad somebody, might as well pick the other ones. So I don't think that's the reason that he became a suspect and then was eventually charged. There was enough stuff for them to charge him. But it's interesting that the court isn't going to allow anything else to be brought up, like other possibilities. And then this thing about the sketches, the 2 guys that look nothing like him, that people said, I saw this guy, I saw that guy. They say it's not, basically the judge is saying it's not relevant. But I want to read this. McLeland argued the sketches were not used to identify Richard Allen. Well, of course not, because they don't look like Richard Allen. And using them during the trial could confuse or prejudice the jury. Again, what? Yeah, well, I think the defense has the right to say people said they saw these guys and they weren't Richard Allen. Do I think necessarily that these sketches have anything to do with the guy that killed the girls? No. I think there's people rolling around the park, and I don't think it's particularly relevant. But I don't understand, that'll confuse the jury. Again, these 2 things that are stated right away are fodder for an appeal, if I have seen fodder for an appeal. And there's these new things called CUIs, conviction. I always forget that. Hold on a second. I always forget the name of these things. CIU. Okay, I gotta always look this up. CIUs. It's called the Conviction Integrity Unit. They're popping up. There's like almost 100 of them now across the country in all major cities. And these got to get it ordered again. CIUs. What they do is a new prosecutor comes in who wasn't dealing with this case, let's say in 5 years, 10 years. A new prosecutor comes in, often a very progressive prosecutor. So this new unit will look for cases that they think, somebody was wrongly convicted. They're in cahoots with the Innocence Project and with the media. So they'll pick something out. and it's going on all over the United States. Well, this case, oh my God, that unit will glom onto this case like you wouldn't believe. Some future DA wants to make a name for himself, because it's all very political, because he just wants to be popular. And it makes him popular, he'll go for it, and he then can do it and run around needing an appeal or anything. You can just simply say, as a new prosecutor, I'm dropping this case. He can go. It blows my mind. Why? Because the same people who are so for a civilian jury system, who so believe in juries, then toss the juries out the window, say, oh, we don't care what the jury said. We don't care if the jury found that person guilty. We don't care about the appeal system. We just care that there's one guy, there's one prosecutor, there's a new DA that rolled in, says, I don't think he's guilty. I think he was railroaded, and lets him go. And some judge does the same thing. Unbelievable. It's a real problem, like a cancer in our system right now. This let all these guilty people go, because by the time they put it in the news and the media's all over it, they never tell you the actual facts of the case. And they tell you that, oh, this guy's totally innocent. And most of the time when I look at it, most of the time they're guilty as heck. So in my opinion, the chances of an appeal are very high in this case already. And the chances of these, let me read it again, because I have trouble with it. The Conviction Integrity Unit. I got to get this in my head. Conviction Integrity Unit, a division of the prosecutor's office that investigates claims of wrongful convictions and to remedy false convictions. That's what they do. They review evidence and they remedy things without anybody else getting involved, including the entire legal system. Anyway, so that's something I see right up front. Now, so I think this is problematic. I'm not fond of. I prefer that at this point. I prefer the defense to be able to throw out whatever they want, because they've already tainted the jury with the whole odorous thing anyway, and everything else that's out there. So why can't they present that and have the prosecution have the opportunity to fight back? Now the prosecution can't even say that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Dumb, just totally dumb. So why can't now the prosecution is actually? I think it's actually more detrimental to the prosecution than to the defense. So, and here's another thing that the defense said. Let me see if I can find it here. It is, here, put it over here. Hold on. Because I thought this was, oh, here it is. A second. All right. They want to also say that, I can't find it. The defense is trying to say the girls, this is now an alternate theory, which I don't know how that is permissible, but okay. The girls didn't actually go straight to the bridge. They actually, no, it doesn't make sense. I'm sitting here rubbing my head because it hurts. Supposedly they were on some, I don't know, some little road that went off of this away. And they were taken from the park off to some other place where something happened to them. And then they were brought back to the park and dumped there, or brought back to the park and killed there. I haven't heard this whole theory that the defense has thrown out yet, but I'm going, what? First of all, if you were there and somehow, doesn't make any sense. You got the girls and took them out of the park. The last thing you're going to do is waste time trying to bring them back to the park. You just dump them in a ditch someplace. Or bury them someplace so they can't be found, for God's sakes. You're going to bring them back? And how do you get them back there? This bunch of people, because it's supposed to be more than one person. I guess this is Odinist theory version number 2. I don't know. It's such nonsense. I'm like, so that's crazy. Anyway, so that's another thing that's coming out. I'm just shaking my head. All right. What about some of the major pieces of evidence? One of the big new ones is that there was a clutched hair that supposedly did not match either girl, or maybe it matched one of the girl's relatives, or maybe it didn't. A blonde hair. And I'm not going to go further with that because I actually have no idea what they're talking about yet. This is why I'm going to recommend that you don't jump to conclusions early on, because the evidence has not really been presented by both the defense and the prosecution. They haven't presented the evidence. We just hear about a hand with hair in it. Well, hair is easily transmittable, so I don't know how valuable that is, but there you go. So that's one. Another big, of course, issue in this whole case is the bullet that was not used but cycled through, so had some marks on it cycling through a gun, and they say that matched the bullets in his house as the ammo he had, but it's not as good as if it actually been shot, and you could use that evidence, and it really could match a gun, but this could just match a gun like the gun, and there's many guns like the gun that could do that. Okay, that again, it all depends on the totality of evidence. Do we have enough that, and so his supposed confessions? Let's talk about supposed confessions. Okay, so he confessed a lot to his wife, to this person, to that person, and the defense says he was losing his mind in the cell, and you'll do anything to get out. Sometimes false confessions happen. That is true. The prosecution says he said things that no one knew but the killer. And the defense says, but he said stuff that wasn't true, like the girls were shot in the back or something, and that's not true. All right. First of all, let me separate those two things. If he knows stuff only the killer could know, and I mean they have to be things that you really wouldn't think of just by guessing, but something you go, how would he know that? That's never been any place. How the heck did he know that? Oh, the defense can always say that somehow those odinists in the prison gave him that information. But if he's got information that really only the killer could know, then it is question. That's interesting. Can he also be fed information from detectives? Well, the defense can come up with that too. I happen to work on a case where I personally believe the sheriff did give information to the suspect to get it to look like he knew something. So I've seen it happen, and I've seen it in certain cases where in interview methodologies, they will say, well, didn't this happen? And then the guy goes, oh, okay, that happened. And in that question is given information. It happens, and that is obviously not acceptable. So does he know stuff that no one else could know? And is there any way that he could have been fed information? That will be what the defense will say. Secondly, the defense says he says things that aren't true. Well, on the other side, one of the things you can do, because you're talking to your defense attorney all the time. Defense attorneys, here's what they do behind the scenes. All right, dude, you're in serious trouble. We got to find a way to mess things up. Here's my idea. Okay, why don't they already think you did it. Why don't you do a confession to your wife? But while you're doing it, you're going to give 2 or 3 statements that are not consistent with the crime. And that will eventually make it look like a false confession. And we can use that forever. So when they say, oh, you did this, why would you say, what? You had the crime wrong. Let's do that. Defense attorneys will do that. I wish we had video of the private things between the defense attorney and his client. But of course, that's not allowed. But if we did, and it was available later on to find out whether the defense attorney actually created scenarios for his client to come up with. And that does happen all the time. And it happened as a profiler. I've been brought in by defense attorneys who tell me, so Pat, if my client weren't guilty, do you have another scenario for us? How about a serial killer? Can you make it a serial killer, not the husband of the woman who got brutally murdered? Can you make a serial? So they're telling me to make crap up. They don't care about the truth. They just want something that'll get their client off. And I think when they manipulate scenarios, in my opinion, that's unethical. But our system doesn't care about that. Apparently, defense attorneys can be as unethical as absolute hell in the court and outside of the court. So they can tell him to, hey, say some things that didn't happen, that we know didn't happen, and that might help you get off. So I don't entirely trust. Maybe the confessions, maybe he's been led by his defense attorney. Maybe not. I don't know. So, and can the prosecution have also given him information? I don't know. So this case is very problematic in that I don't know that the prosecution will have enough to overcome the mess that this case is, so that 12 people on that jury are going to just say, oh my God, I got a headache. I don't know. I just freaking don't know. I am confused. And even though the judge disallowed all this stuff so I wouldn't be confused, I'm still confused. And since they are not trained in evidence analysis, behavioral analysis, forensic analysis, and how prosecutors and defense attorneys will spin your brain around so you don't know what the heck you're thinking. They're not good. This is not their profession, for God's sakes. This is not their profession. They have absolutely no training. The training is the prosecutors trained, the defense attorneys trained, the experts are trained in this. They bring in 12 people to listen to trained people and try to decide over their heads whether the person's guilty or not, even though they have no training. And in certain cases, it's pretty easy. Most prosecutors only take cases to court that are so easy for the jury to convict. That keeps the prosecutor's conviction rate really high. And it makes the civilian jury system look successful. Look, they knew it. They came up with the right answer. Well, yeah, because there was no other answer to come up with. It really wasn't another one. But in a case that's very confusing, all you need is one in this country to say, well, there was reasonable doubt. I just don't know. So from the get-go in this case, I think I really do. But I don't know, maybe I will be surprised. So I am going to keep doing analyses as the case goes on to find out, what do we know about that hair for real? What do we know about his confessions for real? What do we know about anything for real? And I don't know much yet because we're just beginning this whole trial process. And so I honestly do not know if this guy's guilty or not guilty. All I can say is that the prosecution did have better suspects to railroad. That they came up with him, I would think there had to be enough for them to go, we too are surprised, but the guy was there. We went and checked, we went and checked out his house and we found stuff. And I don't know, there's stuff about the fire pit. And I, again, don't know all this stuff. And that his gun was and the ammo was matching that one bullet that was sitting around. And then he confessed, but while he was in jail. But I don't know because I haven't heard everything yet. What I can tell you is it is an odinous. That's just nonsense theory, absolute stupidity. I believe it is a serial killer type because you have somebody who had an opportunity in an isolated location to enjoy himself killing and whatever else he got out of this. That to me is a serial killer type. The very good point that people make is like, well, heck, he seems to have no charges or even been ever arrested for and suspected in other serial homicides. So in the midlife, after his daughter had grown up, he suddenly decides he's going to go out and kill some teenagers out of the blue. Is that unusual? Yes. But there's two possibilities. One is there are people who have fantasies that they keep inside or they enjoy in private in certain ways. They have fantasies and they grow and they grow and they grow. And perhaps there's reasons why that person doesn't enact out those fantasies until a certain point in life. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that if he is guilty, he actually has committed some other rapes or assaults, sexual assaults, or even homicide prior, but nobody's ever linked him to those. Now, I'm pretty much assuming that the police should be looking everywhere in the area or any place he's ever traveled to see whether he was involved in anything else. So just because there isn't evidence that he's committed this kind of crime before doesn't mean he couldn't commit this kind of crime. However, I believe there's one guy saying down the hill with a gun. There's nobody else in sight. So I don't know where this defense comes up with a whole group of people. It's just nonsense. There's no group of people, just one guy. There's one guy. And then they say, oh, he couldn't control two girls. Get out of here. There have been a lot of one persons who have controlled two, sometimes three victims and killed all of them. How do you do that? It's pretty simple. You make them lay on the ground and you say, if you move, I will kill you or I'll kill your friend. That's enough. A guy with a knife has got a gun and a knife. You're terrified. You think, oh, if I cooperate, nothing will happen. And then once you're on the ground, you grab one girl's, you cut her throat, and by that time it's done. All you got is the other girl to grab. And they're only like 6 feet apart. It's not a hard thing to do. It's nonsense that one person can commit this crime. And so that I know. I will say this. I won't say I know. Okay. I believe only one person committed this crime. It was a sexual homicide, regardless of whether certain things occurred, because sexual homicides can not necessarily also include rape. They can include other things. I mean, there was clearly the girls were made nude, both of them at some point. Clothing was taken from one to the other and one was left nude. I don't know the whole, I don't know what's going on in the mind of this guy, if he's the guilty one or whoever the person was. If you think that profilers can get inside the mind of the killer and know why they did everything they did at the scene, no, I'm not that sick. And I don't know that particular sick person's brain, because each serial killer, each type of person like this, each psychopath like this has their own little weird fantasies. And they do what they think is fun at the time. And sometimes it goes the way they want. Sometimes things go wrong and that confuses the scene. Sometimes they get interrupted or they get spooked. And so then the scene looks different than you would expect. So it's very difficult to do that, get inside the mind of every move that the killer makes. No, but I don't believe there's more than one person. And I believe it is a sexual homicide. So of some sort, and the two girls were just available. And the other thing the defense says is, well, you think this guy's just walking around with his gun and his knife? Why not? He won't be the first person to walk around with a gun and knife. But guess what? Bridge guy down the hill, he was walking around with a gun and a knife. Somebody was walking around with a gun and a knife. Why can't it be him? Somebody was. And these girls, they made this plan to go out there. I don't know how many people knew they were going out there, but if nobody knew they were really going to go out there, except they just at last minute decided to have this fun day out there and were dropped off, to me, it was pure luck. Whoever ran into them and thought, these girls are in an isolated location and I'm in the mood. So whether it's Richard Allen or not, I do believe it was one perpetrator. And so I don't go with the stupid Odinist theory. And but do they have enough to prove he was the one that committed the crime? And I do not know, and I will not know until the prosecution presents their entire case and the defense presents its defense. So that's my part one. Okay, part one. And I will do part two when I see there's something to talk about. And it may be tomorrow. It may be 3 days from now. I don't know. But I want to only analyze when I see something interesting that I think would be beneficial for people to understand. So anyway, thank you for being here. Do remember to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications, because I will be doing something more about this. Check my playlist for my previous stuff on Delphi. And also, I think I'll try to remember to link it below, my Delphi stuff, but there's a bunch of it. Yeah, check it all out. And I will see you when there's more to talk about. Okay, bye.